everything that we feel is a little bit of a signal to us, and it's not a flaw. It's not a default or defect.
I've always been that person where I was like, you can't tell me what I can't do because I will figure out a way.
A lot of people, when they come into coaching or they're feeling resistant about any kind of change, it's because they're uncertain about where they want to go.
An industry that is based on a product that is meant to make people happy, there's a lot of
Yeah.
joy that is missing. Hey everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of the 12 Steps to Success podcast. I've been sitting with this idea for a while, wondering what these conversations might become once they're out in the world, and maybe also wondering what they might show me about my own path. So starting here feels a little strange and a little good at the same time. My guest today is Marni Wandner. She's someone I've known for years, though, to be honest, there were parts of her story I hadn't heard until we sat down for this. She's worked across the music world in ways that have shaped whole teams and careers, then rebuilt her own work after hitting a point where she just couldn't keep pushing. We get into the early chapters of her life, the creative pull she felt as a kid, the way she drifted into the digital world without really planning it, the pressure of running her agency, and the slow realization that burnout isn't always loud. Sometimes it sneaks in while you're trying to be useful to everyone else. What I like about this conversation is that it isn't a straight line. There are pauses, a few detours, a couple of moments where one of us is thinking out loud, and maybe that fits since the whole point of this show is to look at how people shape their path when they're not entirely sure where it's going. So here's Marni, and here's episode 1. I hope you enjoy it. I am very, very excited to be able to welcome a good friend onto the very first episode of the podcast. And as we had spoken about previously, there was a reason I wanted you on because I feel like you will set the tone for how this season is going to go. So Marni, welcome. It's really nice to have you here. As you're American, you probably won't understand this reference, but what's your name and where'd you come from?
My name is Marni Wandner. I come from New York, where I am now. And I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, my pleasure. So there's a whole bunch of things I want to talk to you about. But firstly, I kind of want to go right the way back to when Marni was even smaller than Marni is now. And Marni is kind of pocket-sized, everyone. But so I think that's a fair thing to say.
I am small.
All the best things come in small sizes. It's true.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to embrace that.
So I want to talk about when you were a kid growing up. Tell me about what was it like at home and how did that impact who you have become today?
Oof. Big old question right off the bat. In any particular way or just kind of the general vibes?
Well, you can interpret that question however you feel relevant.
I will. Firstly, I think my parents were very and still are very into music and the arts. And it was a very music-filled house. Both my parents, they were in bands when they were younger, and they're still very into like discovering new music and things like that. So there was always music playing in the house, which is, I think, kind of part of why I ended up in the music industry, but just generally why I was always interested in it. But it was also the reason I think that I ended up becoming the first thing I ever wanted to do was dance and then act. And it was encouraged. It wasn't like, oh, why would you want to do that? It was like, great. How can we support you in that? Which was really great.
And this is one of those things, when I was doing my little research around this, and I was like, oh my God, Marni was a triple threat and I did not know this.
Not a lot of people do. Yeah. I've recently started talking about it a little bit more, but yeah, that sort of didn't come up that much when I was running a marketing company, shockingly. But yeah, that was what I did for most of my life, and, majored in theater. And I think my parent, being that there was so much kind of art and music in my family, it wasn't like, of course you can't major in theater and then move to New York after you've graduated early and you don't know what you're doing, like that. It was kind of like, yes, do that. I was joking recently. I'm like, you guys could have told me no. You could have said like, why don't you get a real job?
It's funny. My mom, when I was growing up as well. And so when I was getting ready to go to university and I got offered this unconditional place to LIPA, which was like Paul McCartney's fame school in Liverpool, to do business management. And then I got a job working for a management company. And I was like, I'm good. I don't need to do that. And my mom was like having a meltdown, being like, oh my God, he's not going to go to school. What is happening? Well, like, this was not the direction we were going in. But like, she was supportive. And I think like in hindsight, she knew it was the right thing. But at the time, I think I probably like shaved a good few years off of her life.
Oh, no. And she's like, what does that look like in your future? And you're like, I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah. But I think but that's the thing, because we have both taken these very unconventional paths. A large part of that is you just kind of have to figure it out as you go. And there's like a resiliency that you build really early on,
Yeah.
because there isn't a defined path. It's like, I remember having a conversation with a careers advisor at school when I was like 12 years old, and I was this precocious little 12-year-old child, when they were like, what do you want to do when you grow up? It's like, well, I want to manage bands. Like,
I love that.
okay. You can imagine it though. You've known me long enough to know that's exactly what I would have said. And I remember sitting there, and this careers advisor, this poor guy, just looked at me and he was like, well, not many people do that. Have you thought about a job in the police force? I was just like,
So
what?
180? No,
Yeah,
I have
totally.
not.
And it was like, well, no, but you are correct. Not many people do it, but I will be one of them. And then like my first job was in artist management. And so, I've always been that person where I was like, you can't tell me what I can't do, because I will figure out a way. And, you worked in artist management as well. That was like one of your first jobs in the industry as well. So how did you fall into that?
Yeah, it was also my first job in the industries. And likewise, it was like, the only reason I knew that it was a job was because I had kind of a somewhat distant cousin who did do that as a job. I wasn't really in touch with him, but through my grandmother, who would bring me Red Hot Chili Peppers merch sometimes when she had seen her cousin, who was his mother, because that's the band that he managed. And I just knew that you could do that as a job
That's
in
a
the 90s.
really cool cousin to have.
But at that time, I mean, I was in middle school, and I really didn't have any contact with him. That was not when I wanted to be a manager, but when he was managing them. And so I just knew, okay, that's what he did, like put that in my brain of like, that's a career you can take. And then really it was when I decided at some point in my early 20s that I actually didn't want to pursue a career in acting, even though that was the only thing I ever wanted to do ever since I was very, very young. And I'd set my entire life up in that route, and was like, oh no, if I don't want to do this, there was no plan B even in something else creative. Like there was, I liked writing. I loved music. I was like, maybe, and then my first thought was maybe I'll be like a music journalist, right? Because that's an easy path as well. So I'll start doing that. And I started writing articles and sending them to magazines. I wrote like a piece on like an indie film festival for a newspaper. I don't know. I just started doing it and somehow got little jobs doing that. And then I was like, I don't know if this is really, and then I started thinking about music and of what could I do? And I was like, well, I do know that artist management is a job, and I do like the idea of working with artists because I am one, and like being on the other side of that, but being on the other side of it, like I wouldn't have wanted to be a talent booker for actors because it was like too close to what I was doing. But this was kind of like I can help artists in a different way, but I really appreciate their craft, and I, can help them in some way. That's how I was thinking about it.
I was similar, because for me, it
How
was
did
like,
you at
well,
12?
unlike you, yeah, I know. This is the thing. Unlike you, I never had any desire to be on stage at all. Like, that's not my thing. Like, I have done drag, it is like super fun, but
I would love to
I
see
do
that.
it. It's a thing. But yeah, and like weirdly, I've been approached about being in bands and doing all these different things. And I'm just like, it just doesn't give me that sense of joy that listening to music gives me. And so all I knew from a young age was how much I loved music, how much I was inspired by my mom. Like, she's super inspiring. And I was like, well, I could bring the two together. And it was actually through a conversation with a friend of mine's mom, who they were like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. And instead of what the career advisor did, my friend's mom was like, well, what do you like? Let's start there. And so we were talking about all these things, and she was the one that pieced it together. And she was like, well, you know that like bands have managers. And I was like, I did not know that. And so it just kind of started from there. But I never had that desire to get up on stage, because as anybody who has stood next to me at a Lady A concert, they will attest to how badly I sing. And you were a thing with me recently where I refused to do karaoke for this reason.
But you don't have to be able to sing to do karaoke, so we're gonna revisit that. But yeah, I mean, and there's also so many ways you can be on stage without singing. I way more enjoy being behind the scenes. I'm much more comfortable helping other people and, helping them figure that part out. So I wanna know, like, how did you put together from your friend's mom being like, "This is a job," and you being like, "Up," to then telling your careers advisor, "I wanna do this," to then
It
doing it?
literally, yeah. So it's like the conversation with my friend's mom and the careers advisor happened very close to each other. So like it was probably within a couple of weeks that that had happened. And I'm very much like we make things happen for ourselves in this world, primarily because from my upbringing, that's what I saw from my mom. So I knew that kind of you can be in difficult situations, but you build that path forwards yourself. And our own beliefs are the things that limit us. And so I wouldn't let that negativity in, even as a 12-year-old. And so for the next few years while I was still at school, I was like looking for college courses and all these different things to see if there was anything. And when I was 12, there was nothing. By the time I went to college, there were two different degrees that you could do in the UK at different schools. One was at LIPA, the other was at Bucks, and they were both kind of music industry courses. So I got this offer from LIPA. And then before starting, I saw that this girl band who had just released like their first single were doing a club gig in Liverpool where I was living, and they were from Liverpool. So in my head, I was like, well, if they're from Liverpool, maybe their manager's from Liverpool. Let me see if I can get some work experience. And so I went down to this club gig and I tracked down the manager and I was like, you need me to work for you. I will be the best hire you've ever had. And it just all came out. And he was
Oh
like, well,
my
look, come into
god.
the office. Let's have a chat and I can give you a couple of weeks work experience. And then, you can go off and you can go and start your course at LIPA. And I was like, great. And so I went, started the work experience. And then 3 days into it, he offered me a full-time job and I said yes. And that was it.
I love it. First of all, that's like the opening scene in a movie about your life. Like
Well,
I can see
yeah.
it,
And then the rest of the chaos that ensued is the rest of the movie. But for
which is
me as well,
perfect.
like I loved artist management. But the problem was, I started doing that when I was 20 years old. I had no real industry experience beforehand, other than just a passion for it. And so 5 years of doing that, and like the band that I worked with were hugely successful. We sold like 14 million records back when selling records actually was a thing.
What
They
was the
were
band?
Atomic Kitten, and so they were
Oh,
huge
yeah,
everywhere apart from the
yeah.
US.
No, but I
But
have heard of them.
that's because you spend way too
Even
much time
being
with
a
British
well,
people.
yeah, that is true. I do.
But like, I loved that time, but every single day it felt like I was having a nervous breakdown. But I was like in my early 20s. I didn't have the words for that. And I certainly didn't know that, I could have just walked away if I wanted. I was like, no, and I've got to keep doing this and I have to push through. And this was my dream. This is what I always wanted to do. If this is what it's like, I'm going to do
And
it.
this must be how it looks. This must be what
Yeah.
it is. There must not be any other way to do it.
Yeah. And, and that's when you start to develop bad habits, which is a nice way of putting the origin story of my addiction. And so, like, all these things that happen, which are normalized in the music industry in a workspace like that, for me, it all started when I was working for that company. But I learned so much doing that as well, because one of the things that I loved about management was you're exposed to every single side of the business and you
Yep.
have to learn it and you have to understand it. And so it gives you this really broad overview of what the music industry is. And so it's really fascinating because I love to learn. And so like every day was a completely different day and there was a new challenge and like I just had to figure it out. And so
Yeah.
it was an exciting time. But so from management, you then went to a label and then from there you started your own marketing agency.
Yeah, I wish I could say that was the plan. Well, I planned it. Similarly, yes, it was my first job in the music industry and arguably my first job in real life outside of trying to become an actor. I didn't really even know how to function in an office. Not that, our industry is it's different, but I say the same thing to anyone who's like, I want to start in music. I don't know where to start. I'm like, just intern at a management company because you'll get exposure to every bit of it and you can decide from there what you want to focus on. And that's kind of what happened. So I loved it like you. It was super exciting. It was incredible. We worked with some amazing bands that a lot of whom I'm still in touch with. And however, I was like, I don't know if this is sustainable for me. Like, I don't know if I can handle this kind of thing on a daily basis without maybe some more experience and understanding how to live as an adult, but also the actual industry and what it means to work. I just needed more like kind of life experience. So I also really really liked the marketing aspect and kind of the helping the bands grow and do their thing and get out there and connect with their fans. I saw the marketing people and the campaigns and everything working, and I was like, this is really cool. This is interesting. And I went to work for a small label, and they were a largely electronic label, but they had just started a management company slash label that was for rock bands, and they hired me as a product manager. I had no idea what that meant, or what a product manager did, and I was like asking around, like, what is my job title? And it was really I was managing some of the bands, I was assisting managing on some of the other bands, and then I was kind of putting together marketing campaigns and also getting bands on satellite radio and just doing all these different things in the scope of kind of marketing and PR, really. And I really then fell in love with digital marketing. And because this was now 2005, so we were calling it new media then.
Oh my God, I remember dealing with new media teams at labels, and somebody recently talked about new media, but in a modern sense. And it was somebody who was a lot younger. And as soon as they said the word new media, I had like this visceral response to it where
Yeah.
it just took me back. And I was like, ugh.
Yeah. Because it was like, new media was like, I don't really know what you're talking about, but I think we need to have it in some way.
I mean, but that's the thing
So
as well.
that's
Like,
what I was doing.
especially when you started Sneak Attack, like nobody else was doing that. And so, like, you really were a bit of a trailblazer in that sense. Like, that's an
Yeah, there were
incredibly
like
astute position to put yourself into, because there was, yet again, as seems to be the kind of general template of your career, there was no path that you could follow for that. You were just like, well, I'll figure it out as I go.
I did. And in fact, like even years into Sneak Attack, I would joke that our secret catchphrase was like, we'll figure it out, because we literally, people would be like, could you do this? And we're like, yeah, I think we could. Let's figure it out. But yeah, at the beginning, it was just me. I honestly didn't really mean to start a company, which people have for years been telling me to stop saying, but it's the truth. I left the label. I didn't really know what was next. I had a friend who had an indie label, and there was a band that we both really loved, and RCA had said, why don't you guys put out the vinyl? It was a band called Priestess from Montreal. And he was like, could they want to also hire us for digital marketing? And I was like, what do they think digital marketing is? Because at that point, this was 2006, I was like, can I just do whatever I want? And that was what I did. I was like getting the songs to blogs and websites, and it was kind of a stoner rock band. I'm like, maybe we should go to like tattoo shops across the country and give them the record and do maybe a giveaway on the site. And it was just like whatever I thought was going to be interesting. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. So I really did get to make up what that was. And then there was another band on that called Annuals. And it was like, can you do what you did with them with this band? And I did. And that's kind of how it got started. And then I was offered a job at a label. And I said, you know what? Actually, no, I don't want the job. You can hire my company to do digital marketing for your bands. Who am I? And they did. We worked together on stuff for years, and I always wonder like the sliding doors moment of like, what? My life could have been totally different if I had done that. But I knew, I felt it in my body like, oh shit, I'm an entrepreneur. Oh no.
It's like falling into it is like such a strange concept, I think, for most people. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs find themselves in that same spot where they're just like, oh, this is what I do now. And they follow their gut. And, when I left Warner's and started my own company, there are highs and lows. There is no doubt about that. It is one of the toughest things I've ever had to do. And I have so much respect for entrepreneurs, because there's something different about people who create something from nothing, whether that's a creative or a business person. But to create your own path is so difficult. And at times it's so lonely as well. Like, how did you deal with that side of it? Because the pressure is on you at that point, nobody else. And having limited experience up until that point, really, and be able to kind of do it for like what you had Sneak Attack for like 15 years before you sold it.
12 years. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm rounding up.
And I was like, I'll do this until I do something else. And then I was like, oh no, okay, that's been like over a decade. But yeah, I think you kind of nailed it. Like, I think a bit of entrepreneurship at the beginning and maybe forever is sort of being like, this confidence because you realize I have to do this. Like, I can't sit behind a desk and do the things that people tell me. Like, I realized that I was like, in the office watching all the people at the job and going, I honestly wish I could do that. Like, I wish that I felt like that matched what was going on inside of me. But I was like, I got to give this a shot. And I was like, let me just try it for a year. I'll see how it goes. I'm going to do this. And I was like, oh no, how am I going to do this? Oh my God. I just told people I guess I have to do this now. And then you just sort of figure it out and go, well, I'm already on this ledge. I might as well do something here. But no, I really enjoyed it. And I felt I'd always been a creative person and liked making something out of nothing. So this was like another, I guess, iteration of that. I liked partnering with people. I still love partnering with people. And then obviously I started hiring people pretty early on because I couldn't do it all myself. But that would, like you would be part of a team. So we would be the digital marketing company. And then there would be, a publicist that would be doing the print publicity when that was a whole job. And then you would, have the label sometimes or a manager. And so there would be in the radio company, so there would be a team and it felt collaborative enough to not be completely lonely, but I would work late. You're starting a business, even when you're not starting a business, even when you're not a business owner in this industry, like we work late.
It's a lot.
A lot of times. So I would be, 10 o'clock leaving the office by myself, realizing this is all on me. No one's ever going to care about this as much as I do. And that's okay. And I want to build this thing and I want to create this culture in my company. And I knew what I didn't want it to look like. And I was pretty sure I knew what it did want to look like. And it just became this like fueled thing of, we can make something together for the artists. And it was like our own little creative enclave, and how are we going to connect to them with the fans? And that was what kind of kept me going for a long time.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting the way you talk about that as well, because it highlights the fact that while we get to work with creators, so much of what we do is still creative, even if it isn't technically how most people would define creative. We have to approach things with this mindset that allows us to be much more fluid. But with that comes the responsibility of how do we personally deliver on these things as well. And, I was really similar. Every company I've worked at where I've had teams of people underneath me, I'm the one that takes on that responsibility of doing the long hours because I'm like, well, look, I'm the one that gets paid the money to be here and like run this team. I shouldn't expect my team who are based in London to just suffer long hours when I'm the one that's paid all the money for that. And I always talk about people working with me, not working for me. That's like been a really important distinction because I do not believe people work for me. I think it is a horrific mindset to have because it is really domineering in an unnecessary way. And I've learned more from my teams than they probably learned from me at times. I didn't expect them to work super late because I decided I wasn't going to get into the office until 10 a.m. in LA like the rest of the office would. I'd be like, no, I'm going to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I will answer emails and do calls with my team. Then I'll go to the gym and then I'll still be in the office by 8 so I can catch the tail end of their day. So that if they really need me for anything, I'm there for them because it just felt like the right thing to do. And I still feel like that today. It's like, I think there's this sense of entitlement that comes from a lot of different parts of the industry, but especially senior people where they're like, I expect you to work around me. And I've never had that mindset. But as you were saying, like, leaving at 10 o'clock at night and you're like, oh, this is on me. For me, it was leaving at 10 o'clock at night being like, I have nothing left to give. And, even as a founder, those kind of like sleepless nights of knowing that it's all on you it's a really tough thing to kind of process. And I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit because obviously like after Sneak Attack, well, I say obviously our listeners don't know this, but after Sneak Attack, you sold the company. But after that, you completely pivoted into the mental health space. And I feel like what you're doing now is something I wish I had when I was an executive in the industry working for big corporate entities still. So Talk to me about the mindset around that. Like, what drove you to just drop everything and change?
It was a gradual change. Um, what you were just talking about with leaving the office and having nothing left to give, that started happening to me a number of years into running my company. And I didn't realize that it was happening, and that I didn't realize that it was burnout, because that was 12 something years ago. So like that just wasn't part of our vernacular at that point. It's just kind of like hustle culture. That was like sort of just how we did, and still to some extent do things, or I'm part of a few people trying to change it. But, it's that really got to me. And I didn't realize it until pretty late, and I kind of just crashed. And it was a scary time, because I was like, I don't want to have to give up I don't want to stop working. I don't, this isn't how I want to go out. But when I recovered, and I worked with some really amazing, I did a lot of research. I've always been interested in like health and wellness. And so I was like, I thought I was pretty healthy. What's going on? And really learned a lot about what I needed to change about how I was working and thinking and living. And, a lot of things changed. But when I got better, I realized I really wanted to help other people do this. And this was at this point like 11 years ago. And I
Wait, it's
enrolled in
been
my very,
11 years since this
yeah.
pivot?
Yeah. Well, since the pivot
Wait, I've
started.
known you that long?
That was before that. I already knew you. Yeah. I
Yeah.
enrolled in my first coaching program in 2014. And I think
Wow.
we met in like 2011.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
So
Okay,
yeah, I
that just
know.
blew my tiny mind.
I know. It's been I know, because people are like, oh, this is interesting. When did you start making this change? I'm like, well, it's been a minute, but I didn't know how it would look at that point. I was like, I don't know. Let me just, I don't really have time to, I don't know, become a doctor or something. I don't really know how to help people in another way. I'll do this year-long program and see where it goes.
When you say you don't know how it would look, was that from a personal perspective? You didn't know how it was going to take shape, or you didn't know how people would perceive what you were doing?
Both. I mean, at that point, there were very few people that I was like, oh yeah, I'm on track to becoming a health coach, and they were like, okay, why? It. I mean, some people were like, yeah, let's talk about that more. And then, so when and then I had to do a bunch of coaching to train and to kind of learn how to do it. And so I would work with people kind of behind the scenes, but not a lot of people knew that I was doing it. My staff knew that I was very into health and wellness. And so if someone got sick, they were like, what do I do? But, or people would be like, what probiotics should I take? Or, whatever. But I didn't know how it would take shape for me. I didn't know, like, am I going to do this full time at some point? And I felt very funny. I sort of did it like behind the scenes. I felt like I couldn't own a marketing company and have that public persona, and then also say like, I'm also a coach and I help people feel better. I couldn't, so if you knew, you knew, and it kind of evolved from there. And then I got a lot more certifications over the last 10 years and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, at that first point, I was like, I don't know, let me just learn a bunch of stuff and see where it takes me.
Yeah. I mean, I love the fact that you have made this pivot, not just because we were at a conference recently and I got to see firsthand just how impactful this work that you do is on other people. And it was so amazing to see. I was reading an article recently that talked about how fame reduces people's life expectancy. And basically, famous people are more likely, on average, to die 4.6 years earlier than non-famous people. And so that's the same kind of health impact as somebody who's an occasional smoker. But then the stats get even more horrific. If you get famous before the age of 25, then that 4.6 years is 2 to 3 times higher. And so the impact that fame has on our health and wellness, it's detrimental. And, you see all these kids who are trying to become influencers and they are putting everything into it. And they're oblivious to the fact that this is having such a negative impact on their own life expectancy. And so I think like what you're doing now is so critical. And I think it's great as well that you're not just an executive coach. You work with artists, you work with a whole different kind of array of creatives and industry people. Like you're trying to help everyone. And I just think it's so endearing what you are doing, and it's so necessary that I just needed to like say that to give you like a big kind of celebratory pat on the back, applause. I don't know. I just love what you're doing because I see how important it is. And then I read all these statistics, but then I also see people like crying with joy because of the interactions they have with you. For an industry that is based on a product that is meant to make people happy, there's a lot of
Yeah.
joy that is missing from the day to day of this world. I love the fact that you are intentionally helping people connect with their joy again. It's really important.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, we all got into this business because we really love music and we want to help it be out there more, and we love artists and we want to support them. And it's a very confusing industry to work in. Because even when you're not the artist who is famous, there's now, kind of, there's all the, there's so, and with obviously social media and everyone's sort of in the public eye at some point, and there's people watching and there's comparison and there's, oh, well, this person, it just, everything's sort of out there. And everyone's in their own version of whatever fishbowl they allow themselves to be in. Some people are very private, but there's exposure for better or for worse. And most of us are very unprepared for what that brings. And whether, the art, like I've worked with quite a few artists who are, unprepared for how to deal with fame and how to deal with being in the public eye and also how to deal with what comes after that, right? Like, oh, you've made this record and all this stuff happened. Okay, do it again. So that's kind of why my work is very well rounded and why I kind of combine the health and wellness coaching with the performance coaching, executive coaching, and even consulting and creative strategy is like, here's all the tools that I bring to the table. What do we need to use here? And how do I get you to understand what you need and what your tendencies towards maybe burnout or how you manage stress or how you could manage stress better? It's really kind of helping people help themselves thrive in very high pressure environments because whether we're the artist or we're working with the artist, it's a high pressure business. It moves very fast. There's so much to learn, like we were talking about before, in every level of the industry, every layer. So there's a lot, and we're like, we always joke, we're not, doing brain surgery, but it's intense. We're doing like a different form of non-life threatening brain surgery every day in some way of like, oh, there's a new problem. I have to figure it out. So it's a lot.
Yeah. And I think when you talk about we're all in our own version of this fishbowl and, we do as much or as little as we kind of want to. But one of the things that I've really noticed recently, especially, is like the pressure on people to show up on LinkedIn in a way
Mm,
that it's unhealthy because LinkedIn now is becoming the same as all other social media platforms where rage baiting content gets the interactions. And so people are making these incredibly outlandish statements just to get interactions on LinkedIn. It's becoming this space where it feels very unhealthy in the same way that a lot of other social media platforms feel unhealthy. And because social
yeah.
media algorithms promote engagement and the way you get more engagement is by just enraging people, it's encouraging people to blur the boundaries of what is actually true. LinkedIn is meant to be about professional networking. I have tried to engage on LinkedIn and be more present, and it's really hard to say positive things on LinkedIn because it feels like you're shouting into the void. And
That's so interesting. Yeah.
I find it really hard. And it's like, it is exhausting trying to put yourself out in a way that is like spreading a message of positivity, feeling like nobody wants to hear it. And so with your clients, they're obviously people who really, really want to do this work. Have you felt any kind of resistance when doing that work because of the way the external world kind of puts pressure on people in the industry?
When doing the coaching work,
Yeah.
I work with individual clients who hire me directly, and then I work with companies who I work with their employees, or I might go to an event and be coaching people there or working with people in a consultant manner. But everybody that I've worked with, they want the help. And somebody I was working with recently, a new client I started with whose company hired me to work with some people in the company. I got an email from him after our first session and he was like, I really didn't know what to expect from this, but I can feel it being helpful already. And he showed up wanting to do the work. He just wasn't sure what the work was. Most people don't
Mm.
know, coaching has become pretty ubiquitous now, but a lot of people are like, but what is it? Like, what does it look like? And is it therapy? And if it's not, why? Like, what is it? And the way that I talk about how it's fundamentally different than therapy in a lot of ways. I am a board certified wellness coach, but I'm not a licensed therapist. Those are very different things, very different training. But the way that I coach is from bringing you from where you are now to where you want to go, uh, which is a big part of why I named my company Future Present. But it's like, how do we get you where you are now to the destination that you're aiming for, but even more importantly, what does that look like? And so I think a lot of people when they come into coaching or they're feeling resistant about any kind of change, it's because they're uncertain about where they want to go. And so part of our work, especially at the beginning of working together, is well, what could that look like? And some people really need help visioning that and creating that. And then we can know where we're going to. But if we're just like walking down a path aimlessly and we're walking off the path, we're going this way, trying to look for something that looks for where we want to go, that can feel scary. As human beings, we don't do well in uncertainty, which is another thing that I teach people is how to be okay in uncertainty because that's a given, especially in our industry. But yes, it's very much like, how do we do this?
Yeah. And the dealing with uncertainty piece is one of the things that I am so appreciative of my sobriety for, because that taught me how to sit with uncomfortableness, like whether that's uncomfortable feelings or feeling like I have a lack of control. Cause, my addiction is a disease of control without a doubt. And
Mm,
so, as part of my recovery, is like having to acknowledge that I actually don't have the control that I think I have and let go of that and be okay with it. That was a tough time, but it's so liberating when you get there, and the ability to, and it sounds so cliche, but rise above and not let this stuff get to you is so rewarding, because for me it allows me to stay present in who I am. And if I stay present in who I am, I can help other people, because
exactly.
if I'm
Yeah,
in that fight or flight mentality all the time, all I'm doing is trying to help myself. And actually, that then becomes toxic to all the people around me. One of the things that we talked about when we were at this conference recently was your use of the five Chinese elements. And I was fascinated by this. So, like, I'd love you to talk a bit about like how you came across that, how it shows up in your day-to-day practice.
yeah, it's become a big part of my work, and it's so funny that you segued into that because as you were talking about rising above, I was thinking about, like, what element that is and what what we need more of in terms of, like, seeing that big picture and having that bird's eye view rather than, like, being in the weeds of it. So I have always been interested in, like, you know, alternative therapies and Chinese medicine and acupuncture and all this stuff, and, I met an incredible woman named Carrie Davidson, 15 years ago, maybe. And she had a wellness center, and I was on the board of her wellness center. And she ended up creating this system called the five archetypes that was built on the Chinese elements, which have been around forever because they're in nature. But she created this assessment. And it's incredible. So I used it for a while for myself and clients, and then I worked with her to get certified in the framework. And really, I mean, it's a lot of things. It's deep, and I could talk about it for hours and days, but really it's a pattern recognition framework. I don't like calling it a personality methodology because it's way more than that. But it basically shows us that we all have all five of these elements in us. So it's very inclusive. It's very much like, how do we bring ourselves together, which is why I love using it in groups when I work with teams of people, because it shows people how they complement each other and how they're similar and how, oh, well, you might be fire and I might be wood, but I have fire and you have wood in you. And we know we can recognize where those are, and we can also help each other kind of bring that up, because whatever my highest element is, that's where that's my strength, but I'm also going to over index in it, and it's going to become my weakness when I'm stressed or,
Oh my God, strengths
you
in
know,
overdrive are such a thing that people don't talk about. And like,
yeah.
for me, I know that my ego can be incredibly overbearing for people, but my ego is also something that has like been able to push me through to get me to where I've been in this industry. But when I was doing some of the work around kind of pattern recognition and understanding my own strengths, the most eye-opening stuff was seeing my strengths in overdrive and understanding for the first time, like, how do they impact other people that in a way that I don't even recognize? Because when you're functioning at that level, you just think you're at your best and you kind of don't see all the negativity that comes with it.
And I think it's all comes back to self-awareness anyway, that, we can't change anything if we're not aware of it. So that's a huge part of, at least the beginning, if not all of the work I do with people is bringing that awareness back to, well, what am I doing? And I mean, that involves, kind of also being mindful and being present, but it's really, it's a constant work in progress, as you know. And it's really about setting yourself up with tools so that you can recognize this stuff. And I always say, the first thing is really to recognize how we are in those situations. So if my greatest strength is that, I can focus on the details of something and, really make sure everything's quote unquote perfect, but that turns into a weakness when I stay in those details and I never finish something because it's has to be perfect. I can start recognize it like, well, what happens in my body when I do that? And what happen how do I act in, when I feel threatened that somebody might not let me work on this more, or whatever it is. And then you can start going, oh, that's what that looks like in me. Oh, there she goes again. She's doing, and then it's like you might be 10 miles down the road in that before you go, oh shit, I'm doing the thing again. But that's the practice that we do to kind of recognize it sooner. And then paired with like nervous system practices and what I call strategic recovery of like, how do we recover ourselves throughout the day so that we can train our bodies to bounce back more quickly and, be resilient. And, so it's so many different things, but it really comes down to, and this is why I love kind of basing it in the 5 archetypes, is it helps me, I say, see through the matrix. Client will take a 10-minute assessment, bring me the results, and I'll be like, okay, this is what I see and this is what's happening. And they're like, are you living in my brain? Like we had that conversation. It's like, how do you know? And because I'm also looking at what the lowest element is. And that's always the thing that you need to work on, right? I can't get myself to XYZ, whatever. Well, that is what that element does. And so we can't just start there. We have to like figure out a way that it makes it sustainable for you.
Yeah. And your post today on LinkedIn that talked about not burnout prevention specifically, but it was much more targeted to, as we go into this holiday season, because spoiler alert, anybody listening, this was not recorded at the beginning of January when you're listening to this. But as you go into this period, here are just some simple tips to help prevent you from overextending yourself. And when I was reading it, I was like, oh my God, this is just so straightforward. But every single day, I find myself doing all of these things that you're telling me not to do. And this, my comment on that post was about, I think doom scrolling is going to be the end of society. And that's the thing I find myself doing the most. And it's like, oh God, I need to be much more present and recognize when that's happening. And like you said about pattern recognition, is just getting better at recognizing it, because the more I recognize it, the more I'm able to recognize it sooner, and then sooner and sooner and sooner, to the point where when I start doing it, I'm like, oh wait, no, I need to put my phone down and get on with this other thing that is actually more important.
Yeah. And I talk to myself all day. I think I even mentioned in that post that how I do that, but like kind of making it okay for other people to do that too, of treat your brain like it's a pet or a child. And, hey, you're walking into traffic. Let's not do that. Let's come back this way, because our brains are wired for efficiency. First of all, they're going to do what's comfortable because that's how, they're using a great amount of energy and they don't want to. Our brains are wired for survival. And then once we kind of get past that, we can be creative and do all the amazing things that we do as human beings. But we have to sort of read our wiring a little bit and go, do I really need to be doing this right now? Or am I kind of like falling into a trap of what my brain is telling me that I need to do for comfort's sake, or for, do I need a break? And this is just what I chose to do because it's comfortable. Do I need to stand up? Do I need to walk around? Do I need to drink some water? But actually I'm scrolling on Instagram. So it's just everything that we feel is a little bit of a signal to us. And it's not a flaw. It's not a default or defect. It's a, hey, this is happening. So it's not punishing ourselves for, oh, I just wasted a half an hour on Instagram. It's like, all right, well, it took me half an hour to realize what happened, but I'm holding a device in my hand that was designed for me to get sucked into it, so I can give myself a break and get back to work,
And I think a large part of it as well is not punishing ourselves when we realize this. We just acknowledge it and we move on.
Yeah. Instead of going, oh my God, I always do this, and ugh.
But I think as well, like just as human beings, we are so conditioned by society to feel a sense of shame and guilt over our actions that's our go-to. And actually, it's fine. Just recognize it. It's like with mindfulness, you recognize it, you push it to the side, and you keep moving forwards. As long as you return to that and you deal with the situation later, it's fine. But it's okay to just recognize it and set it to one side.
I have clients all the time. I feel like I should be, or I should do, I should. And I'm like, just listen to the shoulds. It's a big indicator of feeling like you're not enough or you're not doing something right, or what's the right way to, and then that takes us out of, and I'm absolutely live this. I mean, this, I am not above any of the stuff that I help people with. I have to practice my tools every single day. But, recognizing those things of when we are judging ourselves and even others. And that's a strength in some ways of being able to, optimize things or change things in a way that works better. But when we're turning it on ourselves and becoming self-critical, and that's where the shame comes in, it's not a productive feeling in terms of how we can be nurturing ourselves so that we can be of service to other people. I mean, it's like the oxygen mask thing, in all the ways. How are we taking care of it? How are we talking to ourselves?
One of the things with writing my second book, one of the things I talk about in terms of finding your purpose is actually doing an audit of the things that you think you should be doing or you should have done, because understanding these narratives that we tell ourselves helps you to break them down and actually push through to find the things that are true to who you are. And when I started to pull the
Yeah.
list together, and I was like, wow, I'm actually really, really mean to myself at times in an unnecessary way. And
Yeah.
it was just kind of helpful to be able to take that step back and be very cathartic about doing the work. And it wasn't about trying to make myself feel guilty or live in a place of shame. It was just being really honest with myself about, well, here's all of the stories that I've told myself should be true about me.
Mm,
And because I could see them in writing, it was much easier to then let go of those ideas because
yeah.
I could then start to see how ridiculous they were as well. Um, but I have one last question for you before we go. And knowing what you know now, what advice would you have given to younger Marnie?
I mean, definitely drink more water. I don't remember ever drinking water as a younger person. No, I think the advice that I would give her is focus on the things that you're achieving as you achieve them. I'm still working on this, but instead of just looking at what you haven't done or you haven't done yet or you haven't gotten, and really make sure that you embrace and like relish those things that have gone extremely well, or the little surprises that happened, or the positives, because we just move on so quickly from those things and we're like, cool, I did that, what's next? And that's where we start feeling shitty, and it's a spiral. So I
Yeah,
would definitely, and also just, take a break even though you don't think you have time.
that is a very good piece of advice, especially that last bit, because I am notoriously bad at that. And, with the celebrating the wins thing, I feel like as humans, we find it so much easier to give ourselves a hard time over the smallest thing that has gone wrong and ignore all of the really great things that we've achieved. Yeah, I love that. Well, fully grown Marnie is doing great. I think young Marnie would be proud of where you're at right now,
Thank
even
you.
if you don't drink enough water.
I do now, but I didn't used to.
Same, but that's why I look like this.
You look terrific.
I mean, that's thanks to my boyfriend giving me a very, very strict skincare routine now.
I'm gonna have to learn that as well. Please pass it along.
I will. He will love the fact that somebody wants a new skincare routine because he revels in all of that. You have no idea the amount of time we spent in drugstores buying beauty
Like
products in
skincare.
Japan.
Oh
It's
my
like,
God. So I was just talking to someone who came back from there, and she was like, my girlfriends wanted to spend all the time. I'm like, I would too. Like, what do I buy?
and that's a wrap on episode 1. I really appreciate Marnie coming on the show and agreeing to be my guinea pig, as to be honest, I had no idea what I was doing when I started this project. And that's exactly why I find it so exciting. Listening back, what really stands out to me is how calm she is about parts of her story that were anything but calm at the time. There's a steadiness that comes from actually doing the work on yourself and not just talking about it from a distance. So if something here jumped out at you or made you examine your own habits or the way you move through the world, then I think that's a really good place for you to pause for a moment, not to make a big thing out of it and just to notice it. Marnie's practice is built around that kind of noticing, and you can find links to her work in the show notes. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me for this first episode. And thanks again to Marnie for such a great conversation. I'm still shaping what this show will be, and I really like the idea of figuring out while it's unfolding. If you like what you heard, please hit the subscribe button wherever you listen to your podcasts, and follow us on Instagram at 12 Steps to Success, with the word 12 spelled out, not the numbers. Thanks again for joining us, and look forward to seeing you next week.